So in closing, Brian, if you had a crystal ball, what would your crystal ball say when it concerns Trump and his promises and what's going to come domestically in the U.S.? And also, what would that crystal ball have to say about the economic situation of the West and its position vis-a-vis the BRICS?
Well, I mean, these tariffs are only going to make the cost of living prices worse. Now, I have not been in the U.S. for many years. I mean, I've lived almost my entire adult life in Asia, but I have family in the United States, and they are constantly telling me about the cost of living crisis that they face day to day. And it is bad, and it is getting worse. And I don't know how bad it actually is. I don't know how widespread it is, but it seems very bad. And these tariffs on China are only going to make it worse. And again, the goal is to it's like they can't. People are saying, well, it's going to be, a difficult process to reindustrialize. They're not reindustrializing. If you want to reindustrialize, you need to reform your education. You need to rebuild your infrastructure. They're not even talking about doing that. So this is only about decoupling and transferring the cost of decoupling to the American people. And the brilliance behind this, especially with Trump, is that he is so able to blame China and have people honestly believe inside their brains that this is all somehow China's fault. China, as Carl Zahl always says, is taking and eating our lunch. It's the same thing with COVID. Do you remember people were saying, COVID is all China's fault? They weren't able to detect and warn the world and contain it and stop it in China, and then it spread over to us. Why weren't you able to detect it inside the United States, contain it, and stop it from spreading? People even stop and think about this. It's the same logic with blaming Canada and Mexico for fentanyl and immigration. If you can't secure your own borders and police your own communities, how is Canada and Mexico supposed to do this for you? And then the fentanyl is another perfect example of a crisis the U.S. deliberately made itself and is blaming successfully, I might add, on China. There's people who will tell you, especially when Vice President Vance repeats this lie, that China is making fentanyl and smuggling it into the United States. That is not what's happening. That's not even what the U.S. government is officially accusing China of. They're complaining because China makes the precursor ingredients for fentanyl. Gangs through shell companies are buying these ingredients. They're making fentanyl in labs both in the U.S. and over the U.S. border, and that is how it's getting into the U.S. And by the way, these cartels that the U.S. is talking about going into Mexico and fighting, almost all of them are connected to the CIA. Do people not remember like CIA planes crashing because they were so packed with cocaine coming over the border into the U.S. to pump it into American communities and get everyone hooked on drugs and destroy the fabric of American communities? That was the CIA. That wasn't China. That was the CIA doing it. They're still doing it. So, honestly, if I'm looking into my crystal ball, it looks very hopeless because these are things that are not new. These are old things. Like I'm in my 40s. I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. I remember all of this. There's people who are much older than me that's like a goldfish. They forgot all of this. They forgot all about these things, and they're falling for all of these lies because one, they want to place their hope in Trump. They want to ignore the reality that what he's saying and doing simply does not add up. And so they're willing to ignore all of these warning signs that he's just lying to them, just like every other politician. I mean, like what is more likely, that he really wants to change all these things and he's just goofing it up again in his second administration, or he's just another politician lying to you, telling you what you want to hear to get your support, and then doing the exact opposite once he's in office and there's nothing you could do to hold him accountable? I mean, which one is more likely? It just is so frustrating watching people selectively hear and see what Trump is doing when they were so clear-eyed about the Biden administration, and vice versa. People doing it the other way around, only seeing things that Trump is doing wrong, and they were completely blind and asleep during the Biden administration. It's very frustrating to see this. What people need to do is think about what they really want to see America do, come together on common ground there, and then see through the lies no matter who is telling them. This crystal ball, like I'm trying to think, crystal ball in the future, the cost of living is going to get worse, and this is going to create desperation that will make war with China a better sell for the American people, and war in general easier to sell to the American people. So we're in for a rough ride. The empire is desperate, and I think, as we talked about earlier, there's this deeply seated sense of superiority that prevents them from backing down. They will not back down, and they are not paying a personal cost. Right now, their proxies are paying the cost. Europe, Ukraine, the people on Taiwan, Philippines, they're paying the cost. Next to pay the cost will be the American people. They will be the last ones to pay the cost. There's no consequences. There's no reason for them to stop. So they're not going to stop anytime soon, unfortunately.